Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. We're starting really in the middle of a sugya at the bottom of Chaf Gimel Amud Beis. We're about a blot behind. We'll be about a half a blot behind by the end of the night. We'll learn a blot and a half tonight, Emir Tashem. And a reminder that tomorrow night and the next night I will not be here, but Rabbi Ruvain Handler will graciously be substituting for me. I'm just passing my pay on to him, which is really nice of me, I thought. We um, we ran into a very interesting Gemara about how it could be the case that a person could be chayav for Shavuos shelo ochel and then they ate nevelos and trefos. On the one hand, if you make a Shavuot, you should be restricted from that food. But what happens if you're already restricted from that food? And nevel is asar, not allowed to eat nevel. So this is a machlokas amoraim, and we saw that Rabbi Yochanan was of the opinion that when we say that a person makes a Shavuot of Shavuos shelo ochel and then they eat nevelos, the reason why they're chayav is because of Isser Kolel. I don't just say Shavuos shelo ochel about the nevelos. I also say Shavuos shelo ochel a can of Coke plus nevela. I say something mutter in addition to something usser, and then we have this thing called Isser Kolel. That's Rav Yochanan, Isser Kolel. However, Resh Lakish is totally different. Resh Lakish says that no, the way we avoid this issue of eating nevelos, which is already your mushba v'omed behar Sinai, you already have a shvua, and then on top of that you're making another shvua. So then says the Gemara, how do we solve that problem? Reish Lakish says, well, it must be that we hold either like the Rabbanan and it's Chatzi shiur, or it's Rabbi Akiva and it's Kol Shu. So they give different answers. What we're going to do for the first part of the day today is try and understand why did Rav Yochanan not want to say like Reish Lakish, and why did Reish Lakish not want to say like Rav Yochanan? That's going to be our focus. One more time. Rav Yochanan said Isser Kolel. Reish Lakish said, no, it's Pachos Mikashir. So let's get started. 4 lines from the bottom on Chav Gimel Amud Beis. Bishlama Rabbi Yochanan lo Amar Karesh Lakish. Why did Rabbi Yochanan feel compelled to say that we're talking about an Isser Kolel? That when a person says Shavuos shelo ochel and they ate nevelos, the reason you're chayav is because of Isser Kolel, because demukim la lemasnisin kedivrei hakol. Because he didn't want to have to split hairs between dissenting opinions. Reish Lakish said, well, if you say the Rabbanon, it's X. If you say Rabbi Akiva, it's Y. Rabbi Yochanan's a purist. I don't want any machlokas. I want to give an answer that's shava l'chol nefesh. So that's why he said Isser Kolel. That works for everybody. Ela Reish Lakish, 2 lines from the bottom. My time alo amar ke Rabbi Yochanan. Why is it that Reish Lakish didn't give the answer that Rabbi Yochanan gave of Isser Kolel? So it says the Gemara, Amar Loch, what would Reish Lakish say? Because Ki Amrina and Isser Kolel. When do we utilize the principle of Isser Kolel? That's only, top of Chavdal and Aleph, be'Isser haba me'elav. An Isser that comes about automatically. Rashi says, take a look at the top, Rashi, Chavdal and Aleph, Dibermas Chab Isser haba me'elav, Kegon, ha'ochel nevela, b'yom HaKippurim. Yom Kippur doesn't come because of a Shvua. Yom Kippur shows up because it's the 10th of Tishrei. You didn't do anything to create that day. Masha'en kain be'isr haba al yedei atzmo lo amrinan. So the reason why Reish Lakish cannot handle the opinion of Rav Yochanan is that Rav Yochanan says Isser Kolel applies broadly. Reish Lakish says no, it doesn't. Isser Kolel only applies when the secondary Isser is automatic. It was already an Avela. It was an Avela on the 9th of Tishrei. And then on the 10th of Tishrei, as the sun set on the 9th, turning into the 10th, what happened? Second Isser. So you have Nevela, and you cannot eat anything. So that's Isser Kolal. However, what was our case talking about? Shavuos shelo ochel, and then he ate Nevelos. That's not an Isser haba me'elav. That's an Isser haba al yedei atzmo. And says Reish Lakish, I can't agree with Rav Yochanan. He's wrong, Pashut. That's not how Isser Kolal works. Isser Kolal doesn't work with a Shavuot. It only works when it's Isser haba me'elav, like a day of Isser entering, such as Yom Kippur. And another qualification of this machlokes, second line down on Chav Dal and Aleph. Bishlam al Reish Lakish. I understand the sheet of Reish Lakish. Mishum hachi kapata Reb Shimon. Why did Reb Shimon say you're pater? Look at this brisa. The Tanya Reb Shimon Omer Kol Shula Makos V'Lomer Kazai Sela Korban. I understand why he said you're pater because according to Reish Lakish, this is a case of mushba ve'omed. Remember that Reb Shimon throughout Shas holds that the shiur of a kol shehu is standard fare. So therefore, there's no way to wriggle out of this at all. You're stuck. It's mushba ve'omed. Elul Rabbi Yochanan, my time of Reb Shimon the pater. I understand according to Reish Lakish why Reb Shimon says pater, but if Rabbi Yochanan is right about Isser Kolel, then even Reb Shimon shouldn't say pater. He should say chayiv. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, why would Reb Shimon say pater? Says the Gemara, Midi hu taimel mishum Isser Kolel. Weren't we discussing about Rabbi Yochanan that the focal point of his shita is Isser Kolel? Reb Shimon l'taimei, the less Isser Kolel. Reb Shimon doesn't hold of Isser Kolel. Klal uchlam, out. It's a halachic principle he doesn't hold of. So therefore, we were able to solve that problem as well. We thought that perhaps we couldn't understand the shita of Reb Shimon within the explanation of Reb Yochanan Kamash Malan, that Reb Yochanan will tell you this works perfectly fine. Reb Shimon doesn't agree. Reb Shimon holds that there's no Isser Kola. How do we know that? The Tanya. If there's no Isser Kolel, then Reb Shimon Omer ha'ochel nevela b'yom kippurim pater. Remember what we said. We just said a few lines ago. At the top line, it says that if there is Isser haba me'elav, then you have Isser Kolel. But that exact case of ha'ochel nevela b'yom kippurim pater. If Reb Shimon says that a nevela on Yom Kippur is pater, the nevela status existed before Yontif, and the Yontif piece kicked in, it was Isser haba me'elav, and he still says you're pater, elamai, you must hold. But there's no Isser Kolel. And still the third qualification. We're halfway down Chaf Daled Manav. Bishma Reish Lakish. I understand, according to Reish Lakish, that when in our Mishnah we discuss a korban ola v'yored, that mishkachas la belav v'hein. We learned about this principle, that the korban ola v'yored only comes about if the shvua that was made is flippable, to be said both in the negative and in the positive. I make a shvua not to eat a chatzi shiur, or I make a shvua to eat a chatzi shiur. The result is the same if you eat a chatzi shiur, right? So therefore, I understand Reish Lakish. But if we learn like Rav Yochanan, Elul Rav Yochanan, who holds about Isser Kolel, Bishlam Alav, I know how to say the negative. The negative of the Isser Kolel is, I'm not going to eat this because it's nevela, and then Yom Kippur hits. I understand the lav, mishkachasla. Elahein hechi mishkachasla. But there's no way that we can possibly understand the hain side of things. How do you positively portray an Isser Kolel? And because of the strength of this question, the Gemara blows up the last 15 lines and says, we actually have to answer this a little bit differently. Ella says the Gemara, Kidir Rava. Really what we're talking about is that the stira that we started with last night, and if you just want to look back at 3/4 of the way down on Chav Gimel Amud Beis at the two dots, we saw Hagufa Kasha. There was a stira. The first we said Shavuos Shelo Lechol, and then you ate something that wasn't roi, that if it was roi, you'd be chayiv. And then we said Shavuos Shelo Ochel, and then you ate nevelos and trefos, you'd be chayiv. So how do we answer that question? Says the Gemara, back by us, Ela Kedirava, the first answer no longer works. The answer of, as we saw yesterday, Kan Bistam, Kan B'Mafarish, here's answer number 2, Kedirava. The case over there was talking about a case of pater. What was that talking about? Something that's not roi la'achila. What's not roi la'achila? Dirt is not roi la'achila. And Amar Rav Mari af ona nami tanina. We actually have a similar principle like this, that nevelos in fact are roi la'achila, even though they're aser. So what does this mean? This means that yesterday we had our stira. Let me articulate the stira, and then I'll explain how Rava is answering up this question. Yesterday, at that two dots, 3/4 of the way down, the Gemara posed the kasha. Statement number 1 is Shavuos Shelo Ochel, and then a person eats a food that's not ro'ei la'achila. And then the Mishnah says, you're pater. Had it been that it actually was ro'ei la'achila, you'd be chayiv. The next case, the other side of the question was, that if it's a Shavuos Shelo Ochel, and then you ate nevelos utrefos, we said you're chayiv. So that's a steer between the two cases. What's Rava's answer? The two cases are very different. The first case is where the food's mamish not roi. It's dirt. The second case is that the nevelos, they're roi. It's beautiful. A ribeye that's in the non-kosher section tastes like a ribeye that's in the kosher section. A skirt steak in the treif section is like a skirt. It's roi. It's just usser. So that's why the cases are very, very different. That's how Rava wants to answer up. And the Gemara then can bring a raya like this as well. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Mari Afan Anami Tanina, I can prove to you that by nevelos that they're roi la'achila. Where do we see this? Konam ishti nehnes li'im achalti hayom. A man says that there's a konam on his wife, that his wife cannot benefit from him if he says, I ate earlier today. And that morning for breakfast, he had eggs with treif sausage, with bacon, shkatzim urmasim, a disgusting breakfast. So what do we see from here? The fact that she's a suralo by the konam shows that nevelos are ro'ei la'achila. Because had it been like dirt, it would have been a zero, would have been pater like we saw. So this really strengthens Rava's answer. However, the Gemara doesn't like this example. The Gemara doesn't like the konam example where a husband says, konam, that my isha cannot have any hana from me if I ate earlier today. That's what the Gemara says. Why is that a bad example? Says the Gemara, hachi hashta. You can't compare that to our case. Let's look at the two cases. Case number one is the konam. The man says at 9 p.m., my wife can have no hana from me if I ate earlier today. Konam. What was our case? Shavuos shelo ochel in the future, and then at a later point he ate nevela. So here's the Gemara's distinction. Hasam, in the case of the konam, kevan demeikara achal, because he had already eaten the food when he said his konam, the hadar ishtabala, and then his konam only happened afterwards. Chashuve achshave, Rashi, chashuve achshave b'achilaso, v'gila al atzmo she'ein katzbahen. He's not grossed out by the nevela, so he made the konam after he ate. However, back in the Gemara, Elahacha, in our case, he made the shvua before he ate. Elahacha, mi achshave. How do I know how he's going to relate to that food? And remember what's in the list, not just nevela, not just the beautiful ribeyes, it's also shkatzim or masim. This guy ate a hamster. This guy ate a jar of worms, just slurped them up. So therefore, the Gemara says, you can't bring a raya from the konam case. The konam case is where he made the konam after he already ate the food, showing that he feels that that food is shaykh by him. But in our case of the shvua was made first, and the achila only happened later. We're on the top of Chav Daled Amud Beis on the second line. The next 10 lines of Gemara are comparing Isser Kolel to Isser Mosif. Isser Kolel is when we add in another space of halacha that intersects with the food. And Isser Mosif is where the same food gets a second Isser. Allow me to explain. The case of Yom Kippur is a great example. Nevel is Asr. Yom Kippur is an Isser Kolel. Yom Kippur is not a din in Nevela. It's not even a din in that steak. It's a din bichlalius that you can't eat that day. No problem. That's an Isser Kolel. An Isser Mosif is that the food is nosar, and then the food became tameh. Same item, same chefza. Now two halachic realities on that item. Not because of a secondary thing like Yom Kippur, but the same piece of meat as a second halachic status. That's the difference between an Isser Kolel and an Isser Mosif. With that background, let's stay focused here and try to pick up on the nuances here of the various shitas. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, my taima demand isle Isser Kolel. According to the shita who holds of Isser Kolel, why do they do that? Because midi dehave Isser Mosif. They look at Isser Kolel and Isser Mosif as similar. Uman, and then skip the next word. Uman delesle. According to the one who doesn't hold of Isser Kolel, why doesn't he hold of Isser Kolel? Because Ki Omar Isser Mosif b'chad chaticha. When do we say that there's an Isser Mosif? That's only true in one piece of meat. But b'shtei chatichos lo amrina. But between the two pieces of meat, we don't say that there's an Isser Mosif. But Omar Rava, continuing on this theme, Leman de Islay Isser Kolel. According to the Shitas who hold that there is Isser, remember on the previous plot we learned Reb Shimon doesn't hold of Isser Kolel. According to the other Tanoim, who hold that there is an Isser Kolel, Omar, what if a person says Shvua shelo ochel te'enim? First, he makes a shvua that he says he won't eat te'enim. V'chazar v'omar, a double language, Shvua shelo ochel te'enim v'anavim. Migu dechayil a'anavim, chayil nami a'te'enim. So he has a double isser now by the te'enim. He's made a double shvua. And he has now an isser on the anavim. Says the Gemara pshita. Says the Gemara no. It's not so pasha. Mao de tema isser haba me'elav amrinan isser haba me'atmo lo amrinan kamashmalan. Here we're rejecting a havamina that we had on the previous amud. Here we said that perhaps we would have thought that isser kolel only applies when it's an automatic additional isser, like when Yom Kippur kicks in, or I should say, but had it been isser haba me'atzmo, then it would have not been isser kolel kamashmalan. So we reject a havamina from the previous Gemara. If we were poskim, and we're not, had we been poskim, we would have said that's taka the case. We reject the previous svara, and it seems to be the Rambam does hold that way. However, Masiv Rava Berei de Rabba. Rava asks a question. Rava, who is the son of Rabba, asked a question, and his question is so sharp, we're going to give 6 answers to this question, which will bring us up to the Mishnah. Then we're going to rapidly learn down toward the bottom of the page, and then we'll call it a day. So let's see what Rava Berei de Rabba's question is. We're a third of the way down on Chaf Daled Amud Beis. Yesh ochel achila achas v'chayiv aleha arba chatos v'asham echad. This is not good. You have a Jew, he does something wrong. He's chayav 4 chatos v'asham echad. There's one piece of meat, ve'eluhain. He takes a piece of meat, which is tameh. He's tameh, I should say, and he's eating something holy. And she'achal chelev. He ate the chelev, which was aser, and he ate it while he's tameh. 2. V'hu nosar. The chelev stayed out a little too long, so he's tameh. He ate chelev, which is naturally aser in a behema, and it's nosar. And it's mina mukdashin, which that's why the tameh one actually functions, and b'yom kippurim. And it's also Yom Kippur. So this guy has stacked the isurim. Rav Meir wants to throw a little bit of kerosene on the fire. Oh, afim haisa Shabbos v'otzio chayiv. If he carries also, he's chayiv. Say the chachamim amrulo eino min Hashem. What does that mean? And if you also kill someone while you're walking, while you're eating, and if you also are wearing shatnez, what does Rav Meir even mean? The Gemara rejects it outright. The chachamim don't like it. Now, V'im Isa, if it's true that Isser Kolel applies, even when it's not Ba Me'elav, even if I create the scenario, if you want to say that Isser Kolel is, that Isser Kolel applies even when I induce it, Mishkachas Lachamish, I can come up with a 5th chatas. What's that? Kigon Sha'amar, Shavua Shelo Ochel Tmarim V'chelev. Oh, that's Isser Kolel. It's a beautiful, sophisticated question. The Gemara says, Rava Berei de Rabba asks this remarkable question. You just said in the Gemara that Isser Kolel applies even if it's not automatic, even if I induce it. But yet we have a brisa that says that there's 4 chatos, and for some reason, you left out the case of Shvuah. But if Isser Kolel works even in non-automatic scenarios, then it should have been 5 Isurim and not 4. Brilliant question. Love it. So then says the Gemara, very good question. Here are 6 reasons as to why your question is not a good question. Answer number 1, halfway down. Ki katani Isser haba me'elav, Isser haba me'atzmo, loktani. Our Mishnah was just not talking about that. Sometimes you're like, okay, it's an answer. You squeezed out an answer that, but it just says that's not what our Mishnah is talking about. But taka true. Had it been that you then were to have induced it, you're right. It would have been a 5th isser. That's true, but that's just not what our Mishnah was talking about. Our Mishnah was only talking about other things. Ay v'harei hektish. We said that it's a case of hektish. Who brings about hektish? A person. Right? So you want to say that the Bryce is not talking about where people bring things on? Hektish is brought out by a person. Says the Gemara, don't worry. This hektish was automatic. Bibechor, dikdushaso merechem. It's a bechor, it's a firstborn. And the hektish status of a bechor is iser ba me'elav. Nobody has to do anything. The animal just has to be born. All of that is answer one, that the Bryce is simply not talking about a case of iser ba me'atzmo. Answer two, two-thirds of the way down. Ibaisema kiktani midi de lesle she'ela. Our Mishnah, a brisa actually, the brisa that Rava Berei de Rabba brings, is only talking about cases where you are not able to recant and to remove something with a she'ela. But shvua de isle she'ela loktani. But a shvua, I can go to a chacham and undo it. So that's not what our Mishnah is saying. You're right. Had it been that the Mishnah was including cases of she'ela, you're right. It would have been a fifth. That's not what our Mishnah is talking about. So says the Gemara, Hare Hektish. The Gemara says you can also be shoal on Hektish. Says the Gemara, it's a klotz kasha. We just answered this. You can't be shoal on this Hektish. Ha'ukmin on bibechor. What are you going to tell the Beis HaMikdash? Look, I know it's a bechor, but I want to just be shoal on the Hektish. You can't be shoal on a bechor. The bechor is kadosh merechem. So if you're going to say that we're talking about a case where the Bryce is not talking about sheila, so then it can't be a bechor either. Answer number three, 3/4 of the way down. Ibaisema, Hiktani Korban Kavua. That case that Rava Berei de Rabba brought was not like our Mishnah, which is talking about a Korban Olav Yored. It's only talking about a regular priced chatas. The Korban Olav Yored depends on your tax bracket. It depends on your AGI. This doesn't. So therefore, the cases are not comparable. Korban Olav Yored, Loktani. Hold on one second. But the case that you gave was a case where there is an olav yored, which is a tamei shachal es hakodesh. That does taka have a korban olav yored. Says the Gemara, no. Ukimta. The Bryce is not talking about a regular yid. It's talking about binasi. Why? Rebbe Lazar Amar nasi maybe seir. A nasi doesn't bring the korban olav yored. A nasi brings a seir. Answer number 4, 5 or 6 lines from the bottom. Rav Ashi Amar, Kiktani midi dechayla kishir. The Mishnah is only talking about cases where there is a regular shiur. But shvua, a shvua dechayla apachos mikashir loktani. I can make a shvua on any amount I want. A tablespoon, a half a cup, 3/4 of a cup, 5/8. I can do whatever I want. So that's not our Mishnah. Hare hektish. That's not true by hektish. Hektish doesn't really have a shiur. Says the Gemara, yes, it does. It has a minimal shiur, but it still has a shiur. Haba'inan shabapruta. When we're talking about hektish, it's not any consumption of hektish that is the isser. The difference would be te'ima. A te'ima is where I place a little flavor on the tongue. So you've seen these scenes in the movie where someone's making something on the pot and they put a little bit on. That's a te'ima. That's not a shabapruta. That's worth nothing. That's worth a half a penny. You have a whole dish, unless it's super expensive. But a dot of food, that's not shabapruta. So you wouldn't be chayv by hektish in that case. Answer number 5, 3 lines from the bottom. Rav Ashi me'avira Amar, in the name of Reb Zeira. He says, Reb Zeira, he says, Kiktani, what is our Mishnah? The Bryce, talking about of Rava Berei de Rabba, that's only talking about a case of Zadono Kares, where the action that you did, had you done it on purpose, would have had a din Kares. But Zadono Lav, if the action that you did only had a lav, loktani. That's why we're not talking about our case of Isser Kolel and Shavua, because it's not Kares. Shavua is a lav, but it's not Kares. V'harei Asham, Dizadono lav, Viktani. We have the Korban Asham. What was the Korban Asham brought for in the Bryce of Rava Berei de Rabba? For Me'ilah. And there, the Zadon of Me'ilah is not Kares, but it's a Lav, and nevertheless it's listed. Says the Gemara, you're right, but we weren't talking about the Asham. The Chatas Ka'amrinan, we were only talking about the Chatas Korbanos, I should say, the 4 Chatos, and not the Asham. And for our final and 6th answer, Ravina Amar Kiktani Midi Dechayel Amidi Debar Achilahu. When we are talking about this brisa of Rava Berei de Rabba, that's only talking about food-related issues. But a shvua can be made on pashut anything. A shvua, says the Gemara, Dechayla Amidi de la Barachilahu Loktani. So that is answer number 6. Oh, hold on one second. You said that everything in that brisa is only about food, but not about non-food. But look at this, 4 lines down on Chav Hey Amud Aleph. Harei hektish dechayil namya etzim va'avanim. Beautiful question. I could be Makadesh, anything. I could be Makdish, I should say, anything to the Beis HaMikdash. So you can't tell me that the whole Bryce is only talking about that which is food, because Hektish is part of the Isser, and Hektish can be on Eitzim Va'avonim. So says the Gemara, you're right. Elakik Tani, what is Ravina's real answer? Midi Akik Tani dechayel amidi deis bei mishasha, only on things that have mamashus. But Shavua dechayla amidi de les bei mishasha, but a Shavua can apply to something even if there's no mamashus. Kigon she'ishan v'shelo ishan loktani. The scope of what a Shavua can do is nearly endless. I can say, I make a shvua that I will take a nap today. Or I make a shvua that I took a nap today. What's happening? It's hard to hear that it's less bei mishasha when you're tired. It is bei mishasha, like our psychology. But sleep is perfect inaction. Only by a shvua can you do that. By hektish, you can't do that. I'm here by makdish my sleep. That's not shayach by hektish. So that's the new distinction that Ravina says, and that brings us to the new Mishnah on Chav Hey Amud Aleph, and therefore the Brisa of Rava Berei de Rabba, where he wanted to understand why Isser Kolel doesn't apply in this particular case, gets 6 answers. Why don't we add in Shvua as the 5th Chatas? And we gave answers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The next Mishnah on Chav Hey Amud Aleph, and we'll be going until about 3/4 of the way down, and then we'll wrap up for tonight. This next Mishnah discusses the following: Echad dvarim shel atzmo, a shvua can be about me. Ve'echad dvarim shel acherim, it can be about me making a shvua about you. Ve'echad dvarim sheyesh bahen mamish, it could be about something that's mamish. I could be making a promise about a building. Ve'echad dvarim she'ein bahen mamish, even about things that have no mamashas. Keitzad, let's go through these now. Interestingly, the first din we already went through, which is Echad Dvarim Shel Atzmo. So when it says Keitzad, it's not talking about the first din. It's talking about Acherim, me making a shvua about you. So here's the case. Shvua she'etein le'ish ploni. I make a shvua that I'm going to give something to you, or v'shelo etein. I make a shvua that I'm not going to give it to you. That's all future, and now in the past. Shenosati over shelo nasati. All of that is in the category of Acherim. Let's move on. What's in the category of dvarim she'ein bahen mamish, she'ishan v'shelo ishan, she'yashanti v'shelo yashanti? Those are examples of dvarim she'ein bahen mamish. What about she'ezrok tzuror layam v'shelo ezrok she'zarakti v'shelo zarakti? These are different options for the case of ein bahen mamish. Rabbi Shmuel omer eino chayev ela al ha'asid lavo. Rabbi Shmuel disagrees with the Tanakam of our Mishnah, who used both future tense and past tense. We've seen this already in this Masechta, that Rabbi Shmuel has no historical Shavua Isurim. You might be a liar, but to say that you're chayav a korban olav yored for a past comment is not true. Rabbi Kiva holds that only if I say I'm going to do something and then you lie, that's when you're chayav korban olav yored. But if you say I did something and you lied, no korban olav yored. Shene'emar lehara o lehetiv, which is futuristic language. So Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, if that's the pasuk that you're talking about, look at this beautiful, I love this. Rabbi Akiva looks at the pasuk that the Chachamim quote. They say lehara o lehetiv, which implies future. It does. Rabbi Akiva is like, yeah, but the words themselves also have meaning. Maybe if you take the Chachamim's argument all the way to the end of its logical conclusion, then, okay, Rabbi Shmuel, if you want to say that it's only future shvuos that are aser because lahara lahetiv, then maybe the shvua has to be ra or tov. Can't be neutral. Because that's what the pasuk is that you're quoting, lahara lahetiv. Dvarim she'ein bayan hara ve'atov aminayin. Maybe, says Rabbi Akiva, and he's asking like a little rhetorically with a little bit of an edge. Oh, and what would you say about a case that's benign? I promise to you that I'll throw a rock in the ocean. It's not ra'otov. No answer. So says the Gemara, they do give an answer actually. Amar lo, the Chachamim do respond. Not the Chachamim, but Rabbi Shmuel. Amar lo, me ribui akasav. That's a ribui in the psukim that allow it. Again, we'll see the details in the Gemara down the road. Amar lo, Rabbi Akiva says back, I'm not sure I understand that. Im riba hakasuv lekach. If there's a ribui in the psukim that says that even if it's not ra or tov, that it's going to be an isser of a shvua, and it would then have a korban olav yored, then riba kasuv lekach, that it should also say that there's an isser for historical shvuos, not just future. Thus ends the Mishnah. So we can obviously see that there is going to be some friction between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, as there already was, and we will speak about this more. Halfway down on Chaf Hem and Aleph, just a little bit more, and then we'll wrap up. Tanu Rabbanon. Chomer ben Adarim b'Shvuos. There is something that is more stringent about a neder than about a shvua. And as well, Chomer b'Shvuos mi ben Adarim. There's also something more stringent about a shvua as it relates to a neder. Let's go through them. Chomer bin Adarim, a neder's power is much greater. Here's what you can do with a neder. Shahanadarim chalim al dvar mitzvah kedvar harishus. Masha'en ken b'shvuos. If a person makes a neder that they're not going to sit in the sukkah, their neder is chal. If a person makes a shvua that they're not going to sit in a sukkah, their shvua is not chal. That's the chomer nedarim b'shvuas, is that the power, the efficacy of that neder is so powerful that you could even put yourself in this pickle of, yes, the Torah has a mitzvah saseh of sitting in a sukkah, yeshiva sukkah, but I made a neder that I'm not allowed. However, says the Gemara, halfway down on Chaf Hayim and Aleph, chomer b'shvuas, what is the stringency of a shvua makes it more powerful than a neder? Shashvuas chalos al davar she'ein bo mamish kedavar sheyesh bo mamish. That a shvua can be made even on something that's less be mamish. I made a shvua that I'm going to take a nap tomorrow, but that's not true by nedarim. And the Gemara just inserts this here. It's a little interesting that it inserts it here because our Mishnah wasn't talking about nedarim. This just is like kind of slid in here. I don't know why I didn't look in the Rishonim, why it's brought here. You can look in the Balei Tosos. I didn't look carefully. I don't know what it's talking about. But nevertheless, a very important Gemara, which does highlight some of the strong features of Nedarim, and that it is even true by a Dvar Mitzvah, and some of the strong features of a Shvua, that you can even make a Shvua and Davar She'en Bo Mamish. Let's talk about the next case, 2/3 of the way down, 4 lines before the wide lines. What's the case where I make a promise in the future to give someone money? My etain. What is this case? If you want to say that we're talking about giving tzedakah to a poor person, you can't make a shvua that you're going to give money to a poor person. You're already chayiv to give money to a poor person. Mushba ve'omed mehar sinaihu. We were using mushba ve'omed mehar sinai in the negative, right? We were saying you're already chayiv on nevelos. Now you're making a neder not to eat a nevela. But it's true even in the positive. If I make a shvua that I'm going to put on tefillin tomorrow, my shvua is null and void. 0. I'm already chayiv to put on tefillin tomorrow. Your shvua is irrelevant. You're just hot air coming out of your mouth. So that can't be the case. How do we know that we have a chiyuv to give tzedakah to an ani? Shneimar nason titein lo. Ella, what must be the case in our Mishnah? Matana la'ashir. I'm not saying I'm going to give money to a poor person. I'm saying I'm going to give money to someone who's not poor. And then the shvua is chal. But if the shvua was about a poor person, nothing doing. Next, and finally for today, our Mishnah said she'ishan v'shelo ishan, that this was an example of a davar she'ein bo mamish, a shvua she'ein bo mamish. Says the Gemara, Eini, I'll show you a brisa where sleep is not even a real shvua. What's the case? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ha'omer shvua shelo ishan gimel yamim. If a person makes a shvua that they're not going to sleep for 72 hours, malkin oso v'yashen la'altar. We give malkos, and the guy can go right to sleep. You made a shvua. It's an impossible shvua. It's still a shvua. You get your malkos and go take a nap, because there's no way that you could possibly fulfill that. So therefore, what do we see? That sleep is not, you can't make a shvua about sleep. It says the Gemara, the obvious answer, because I didn't even understand the question when I first read it, obviously, Hasam Damar Gimel. The case of Rav Yochanan was when someone said, I'm not going to sleep for 3 days, which I believe is impossible. I wonder if it's scientifically impossible. I'm curious. I don't know. But Hacha in our Mishnah, where in our Mishnah does it say anything about 3 days? The Lo Amar Gimel. Our Mishnah says if a person says, I'm not going to take a nap tomorrow, that's a real Shavuot. That's a real Shavuot. I heard one of these great Maisas. I don't know if it's true. They didn't say it about me. They probably didn't say it about you, but someone was having this medical procedure and they said, we don't want to give you medication because if we give you medication, then you'll fall asleep. We're afraid we won't be able to wake you up. He said, no problem. Just give me my tefillin. I'll put on my tefillin. I'll make sure I won't fall asleep with my. We're not so holy. I've fallen asleep with my tefillin on. Many people have. We're not so holy. What if a person made a shavua? Then it would be usher to fall asleep.
So he said, give me the medicine, but
No, he said, just give me the tefillin and I. Oh yeah, give me the medicine and I won't fall asleep because I'll have my tefillin. Whatever he said. It's not me or you. Okay, we'll stop right here at the 2 dots of She'ezrok, and Emir Hashem, tomorrow you'll be together with Rabbi Handler, and I will be back, Emir Hashem, on Thursday, wishing you all a beautiful night.